Welcome to Musicians at Google. I am Adam Stewart, and I am very proud to introduce John Taylor. John is the bass player of Duran Duran, founding member of the iconic British band that was actually referred to as the Fab Five. So if you're going to get a compliment, get compared to the Fab Four for sure. John's book came out on Tuesday the 16th in the Pleasure Groove, Love, Death, and Duran Duran. I highly recommend the book. The book has been the bestseller in the UK, where it was released a couple weeks ago, currently number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. So what we're going to do today is John and I will talk a little bit, and then John's also going to read a couple passages from the books. John will stay afterwards to sign a book, so they're sitting outside, so please be sure to get a copy of the book. And just a couple of requests. We ask no flash photography or recording, and if you could, everyone, I know this is hard to do at Google, please silence your phones. John, Duran Duran 1978 was the year that Duran Duran was formed, and you have an amazing career. What made you decide to write the book at this point in your life?
A couple of things. On the one hand, I lost my dad coming up on 3 years ago this Christmas, and he passed away in the house that I grew up in, and I sold the house, drove away from the neighborhood. You know, he was the last of his generation. I found that I live in the fast lane, like all of us here, and I find that constantly, I have to really fight to hold on to my memory these days, because there's so much information coming at me. And I found that from the moment my dad was buried, the forgetting was happening so quickly. And so that kind of motivated me to think about memorializing my parents in some way. I wasn't quite sure what that was going to be, but I'm an artist, so it's natural. I was thinking, should I write some songs, or didn't know what it was going to be. And then I was approached actually the beginning of last year. There's been quite a boom in music memoirs last couple of years. We've got Keith Richards to thank for that. And I was approached by an agent in London who said, if you were to be interested in writing a book, this would be a really good time. And I thought, well, maybe that's what it is, So I kind of started formulating the idea for the book, which is kind of in 3 parts. There's growing up in the 60s in the Midlands of England and becoming John. And then there's the second section of the book's Hysteria, and that's really about the first 5 years of the 80s and this wild ride that Duran Duran took. And then the third part of the book is the bit I call, becoming an adult human being. And that's really been sort of like some of the more profound highlights of the last 15 years, I suppose. Losing parents, gaining children, marriages, divorces, all of that sort of stuff, real life stuff, but through the lens of ex-pop star.
Could you talk a little bit about your process for the book? I know you partnered with Tom Sykes, and Tom's a freelance journalist, Men's Health, GQ, a bunch of other publications. Yeah. And at the same time, you're going back 30 plus years, and you've got all of these things in the book, really kind of tells the chronological story, as you mentioned. So how did that all come together?
Well, when I did like move everything out of my parents' house, I did come out with a dozen boxes of memorabilia from my early life, which I thought a lot of it was just like gold. I thought, wow, I've got to use this for something. So I knew that, I was going to have some really, really good evidence. I had to sift through that and sort of organize it. Tom Sykes, you mentioned, he's the ghostwriter on the book, and he was fantastic. I don't think I could have done it without him. I thanked him in the back of the book for holding the torch steady as we went through the attics, and he just kept me rolling. We couldn't descend into neuroses. Once we made the decision to do it, and we had a schedule, we had to stick to it. And there was a couple of times I thought, oh, what am I doing this for? I knew I was going to have to get into some kind of murky stuff. It wasn't all going to be happy, but I felt that for the book to be, to have any sense of authenticity to it, it was going to have to touch on some of the darker sides of success. But yeah, we had a pretty good working ethic, and when things got really tough, we'd just get on our bikes and go for a ride, and burn it off.
Sources of inspiration while you were writing. Were you going back and listening to some of the music? Were you reading something in particular? I know you mentioned Keith's book, and that, although I think your book takes a different tone because Keith dishes a lot on his bandmates, and you didn't necessarily take that.
Well, I've read a lot of books. I've read a lot of books. I mean, there's no, I'm a huge fan, first, of popular culture. So I've read a lot of books over the years. And generally, the better books about music are written by writers. But there are one or two memoirs that really work. I mean, actually, I remember when I was about 14, Ian Hunter, who was the singer with Mott and Hoople, and he wrote this book called Diary of a Rock and Roll Star, and it was like a very pragmatic, day-by-day, kind of breakdown of what a band did when it was on the road in America. There was nothing. It wasn't a sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. It was just really basic. But to me, wow, it was just so glamorous and evocative. It was all about finding a voice, it's all about, I mean, I guess, I've done enough blogging and I've done enough interviews and to know that, like, when I'm in the mood, I can tell a story well. It was just finding the way to put that down, to actually record that in the computer. And once we got the right attitude, the right tempo, it all started to flow.
What do you think might be the biggest surprise for someone who picks up the book?
I think there's a number of surprises in there. I mean, it's not just about fame. It's not just about, well, we did this and then we did that. It's a very personal, very human account. Frank is a word that is used to describe it a lot. I mean, there's, it's a coming of age book in a way, and it's and I was able to disconnect from the character quite a bit, really, because like just watching this little kid, the only child, mother, raging Catholic, took him to church every day of his life for the first 5 years, and how he got into music, how music just took over for him. But never. I mean, I didn't have the kind of parents that made me take piano lessons. I mean, my parents were completely clueless when it came to school and education. I had to find it for myself, and and it was at that time, 12, 13, 14, where the desire to remake your identity, my identity, was so strong, and music at that time in the UK. We were talking about this earlier. I mean, there were a lot of very, very strong personalities: David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, Rod Stewart, Brian Ferry. I mean, these guys coming out, I mean, I'm not going to say it was a golden age, but it was a very strong age in terms of personalities. And for like a kid that was kind of just not really connecting in school, didn't, as an only child, I just started connecting with these guys in a big way. And even though I couldn't play an instrument, I just wanted to be in that club. And so, by the time I was 17, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
So your career is really amazing, and I think when people look at a career like yours, they think, there's probably three things. Is it luck, is it timing, or is it hard work?
Yeah.
What do you think that makes sense?
Also, part of the book is like demystifying that. I mean, a lot of people, collaborators, people come and they work with us, and they're looking for the magic. They're looking for, how did you guys, what are you guys, what's the thing, and it's like, you just show up. You just show up at the studio and start hitting chords around. And then, it's like there's really no, I was humbled, actually, looking at I really got into the first few years of the 80s, because apart from the fact it was a fantastic time to be in Duran Duran, I think it was a really great time for pop culture and a very underappreciated time in the culture. I mean, maybe we'll start looking at it more. It was the beginning of techno. It was a period when fashion, photography, video, things were starting to connect in music in a more formal way. It was a renaissance time in a way, and I really wanted to look at that. And I don't write about it in any great depth, but it's there. I was humbled by the amount of work we did, man. Oh my God! I mean, the funniest thing actually was 1982, which was the year of Rio. And we'd gone into the studio. We were in the studio in London, I think, for about 2, maybe 3 months recording that album. And we came out of Air Studios and flew straight to Sri Lanka, where we did videos for Hungry Like the Wolf and Save a Prayer. We went from there to Australia for our first time. In Australia, it was like Beatlemania. And then we went from there to Japan, which was like Beatlemania with Japanese accents. Madness, madness. And then we came to America, and America obviously is a very hard territory to break. Very, very hard. And that summer, we really went for it. We crisscrossed the country several times. We had a record company. Fortunately, at the time, our record company, Capitol, was being controlled by the London office. There are no American record labels like that anymore. So the London office was kicking their asses every day, saying, "You've got to break this band, or we're going to lose them." So Capitol were like, "Okay, what do we do?" And there was a lot. It was a massive campaign. MTV started happening at the same time. We were seeing how our ticket sales and album sales were coming up in states that MTV was showing it. We went back to Europe. We did a victory lap of Britain at the end of the year, like November. House records in our home city. And then I'm looking at, and I've got all this out. I've got the itineraries from back there, and I see that we're at the Holiday Inn in Birmingham, on December the 1st, 1982. And I'm thinking, okay, so what happens then after all of this? Oh, I go back to my parents' house because I'm still living with my parents. That's how crazy. It happened so fucking fast. And there's nothing like a father, to bring you back down to earth, And I think I'd been there 2 days before he was, "Turn that bloody music down, you're not on bloody tour now," And I really enjoyed, and that was a discovery for me. I wouldn't have remembered that if I hadn't have written the book, and that was like, wow.
That's amazing. Why don't we, if you would, do you want to take us through a passage of the book?
Yeah. I'm a little bit concerned that some of the readings are a bit long, so bear with me. I'm going to read a little from this, the first chapter, which is called Hey Jude. I'm 4 years old, confident and shy, hair blonder than it would be in my teen years, in shorts and sandals, a young prince of the neighborhood. The South Birmingham suburb of Hollywood. How perfect. 10 o'clock in the morning on any given weekday in 1964, and I've stepped down off the porch and wait, kicking at the grooved concrete driveway, watching as Mom pulls the front door closed, locks it up, and puts the key in her handbag. She puts the handbag in the shopping bag, and off we go, left off the drive and up the hill that is the street on which we live, Simon Road. Our house is number 34, one up from where the road ends. We walk together along the pavement, counting down, 32, 30, 28. On the left side of the street are all the even-numbered semi-detached houses, single buildings designed to function as two separate homes. Ours is twinned with number 36. Across the street, the odd-numbered houses are detached, each building a single dwelling, all much larger than ours. Each building, and so are the back gardens, which are long and tree-filled and bordered at the bottom by a stream. The driveways are slicker too, with space for more than one car. I hold Mom's hand, remembering the Beatles song that is so often on the radio. As the incline gets steeper, we reach the crest of the hill where Simon Road meets Douglas Road and turn right. We pass a 12-foot-high holly bush, the only evidence I have found that suggests where the estate got its name. We march on, crossing Hollywood Lane in front of Gay Hill Golf Club, an establishment that will assume mythical proportions in my imagination as a venue for wife-swapping parties. Not that anyone in my family ever set foot in the place, and there was no truth in the rumor. Cars flash by at 20 or even 30 miles an hour. We make it to Hyters Heath Lane, another main artery of the neighborhood, which must be taken if you're visiting the old Birmingham of nans and aunts and uncles, recreational parks and bowling greens. It gets traversed a lot by the Taylor family at weekends. It must also be used by mother and son if we are to reach our destination today, St. Jude's Parish Church. I would go to many beautiful or inspiring churches when I was older. St. Patrick's on Fifth Avenue, St. Peter's in Rome, Notre Dame de Paris. But St. Jude's on Glenavon Road was the most pragmatic people's church anywhere in the First World. Built in the post-World War II years, St. Jude's was intended as a temporary structure, not meant to last more than a few years. It's coming up on 20 now and yawning with cold air and aching joints. Single story, with windows every 6 feet along its length, and a roof of corrugated iron. Its crude purity enhanced the idea the St. Jude's faithful had about being the chosen ones. Why else would we gather together in this cold, ugly place, unless it was an absolute certainty that we would benefit from it? A communal sense of readiness sends us through the small lobby where, on raw wooden tables, literature is offered, some for sale, some for free. Textbooks, Bibles, songbooks, and other merchandise, including rosaries, crucifixes, and pendants of St. Jude's, the patron saint of hopeless cases. On into the nave where there is a smell of sweat and yesterday's incense. It's usually cool in here, sometimes warm, but never hot. A tall, red-headed man plays a rickety-looking organ, quietly piping sweet music that is barely there. Eno would call it ambient. Candles burn lazily with a holy scent. On the strike of 11, the service begins. The priest enters smartly, followed by a pair of young men in white robes, the priest's team, his posse, one of whom swings a silver chalice from which more incense issues. The air in the church needs a good cleansing before the good father can breathe it. He wears elaborate clothing, a robe of green and gold silk with a red cross on his back. Beneath the cloak, ankle-length, turned-up trousers revealed the black socks and black brogues of any other working man. The music surges in volume, and we all stand. The red-haired man leads us in a song we know well, "The Lord is my shepherd." I open the hymnal to read the words. I like this one, but like Mom, I'm too embarrassed to sing out loud. I wish I could. I just don't. But I like the feeling of togetherness that comes from everyone in the room singing the same words. Once the song is over, the priest walks to the dais. He glances down at his Bible, opens his hands wide, and says, "Let us pray." Thank you.
John, you met Nick, if the chronology I have is correct, in 1971, so maybe 7 or so years after this picture is taken. Music is changing at that time, and as you guys are growing up, Bowie, Roxy music, and that kind of glam stuff starts happening. At 76, there's this turn, it's the Sex Pistols, so you get this kind of real change in music. 78, Duran comes about, and you and Nick clearly have some aspirations, some pretty ambitious goals. At what point in the journey were you like, we've arrived, this is it, this is what we've always set out to do?
Well, we were lucky. We connected with a nightclub in our home city of Birmingham, and the guys that ran the club, that owned it actually, were two brothers. And it's all about team building, isn't it? At the end of the day, it just is. I don't believe in solo acts. It's all about building a team. And Nick and I, we were the founders. And then we formed Duran, and we had a couple of guys come in, and then they left. Something that I talk about in the book, how galvanizing it is when people leave, and they go on to something else, and you go, "You fuckers," But you go, "We're going to show them." We were written off quite a few times before we had a record deal. And then somebody introduced us to Roger Taylor, who was the drummer, and that was when I started playing bass. And then it took us a long time. Funny thing about Duran Duran is, like, I remember Boy George. He was a Brummie too. He spent a lot of time in Birmingham, and I remember talking to him at a wine bar in like 1979, and him saying to me, "What's the name of your band?" And me say, "Duran Duran." He goes, "Duran Duran? Are they still going?" We bounced around our town for a while, and we went through finding different, and you'd find the right, and then the guitar player, and then the guitar player would leave. But we made the acquaintance of these two brothers, who became our patrons, and they started putting a little bit of money into us, and they gave us a place to rehearse, and the group identity kind of formed itself in this nightclub. And then Andy came down from Newcastle. He answered an ad in one of the national music papers. He came down. He was cut from a different cloth than we were. He was hardcore, and he knew his music, And then within about 6 weeks of him coming, and he came down. He moved from Newcastle, 300 miles to Birmingham, and we didn't even have a singer. That's how confident the three of us and the managers were. That by the time Simon came on board, we were like, "Great, okay, sign here, we're off." And we said, the day that Simon came in, he walked up to the microphone. We were playing. We'd already been working on the architecture of the sound, right? So we knew what the band sound was going to be like, but we needed the voice. Simon came in. He got a blue exercise book, that he used to make notes you know, like ideas for poems and whatnot. I love Nashville, by the way. I just want to put that out there. I think Nashville is like the best new show, and I love the way they talk, the way they address songwriting and collaboration. It's smart. It's really well done. And Simon had a book with some words in it, and guys like that in the music business are priceless. There are so few of them. It's so easy to make a beat, but somebody comes in with a decent bit of poetry on paper, sign them. You know, and Simon walked over to the microphone and just, you know, well, try this, blah, 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 you know, and then that was it. We were off. And we said, right, we've got a gig in 4 weeks.
So, I mean, Duran Duran certainly...
Let's write some songs.
I mean, Duran Duran certainly cut a path that was kind of different than really just about anyone else at that time, because it's, you know, you brought together different factors and things that were happening in music. But I'm curious because disco, and you talk a little bit about Chic in the book and everything like that, because there's an aspect of kind of new wave and an aspect of disco, and especially in the early kind of Duran Duran music. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how your sound came together as a band?
Well, I remember being in a pub one lunchtime in Birmingham. I went to art college for a year, and I was on my lunch break, and I remember the jukebox in the pub, and Anarchy in the UK came on, Sex Pistols. That was an anthem for me, really, really massive record. And then Chic came on after that. Everybody Dance, I think it was. And I remember sitting there thinking, I love both these songs. It was like being Republican and Democrat at the same time. It's like you really were supposed to, it was either or, you can't be both. And I thought, but I am both. You know, I love both of those musics. And I thought, God, if we could just, you know, somehow combine those two things. And the key for me was to become a bass player, because that way, you know, the thing about Chic's music and disco music, you know, that really got my attention was the bass. You know, and the music that I've been listening to, the bands that I've been following, you know, in my late teens were bands like The Clash, you know, that were really guitar-driven. The bass players just followed the changes, you know. Nobody really listened to the bass, you know. It was just part of the sound. But in disco, you know, the bass, it almost felt like it was the lead instrument. And so I started playing with Raj. And fortunately, you know, Raj, who was also a punk, but he was kind of like, yeah, you know, we were like Another One Bites the Dust, you know. Bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-dum. You know, you're doing it together, and it's so much fun. Yeah. You know, and then you bring in, you know, the big guitars over the top of that, and then maybe you've got something. And that's kind of like what we were. And then at the same time, you know, these were the days of the first affordable synthesizers. You know, and I think we got one of the first Wasp synthesizers, which came into Birmingham. It was about this big. It was plastic. Cost £199. And, you know, you'd have to hold it down. You know, and, you know, you put a beat to that. You've got techno.
Cool. Cool. In the book, you talk a lot about celebrity. And you're a celebrity and what you went through. Talk to us a little bit. I mean, what was the best and the worst part of celebrity?
Well, I think the best part, I'm reaping the rewards of it now, really, because there are just so many people out there that care. You know, when you've been a part of, I mean, I know how much Bowie means to me. You know, there's like a handful of guys that helped me become, that helped me through that really difficult time from like 13 to 15, 16. And I love him like I love my dad or my wife. I mean, you know, and we had the privilege to be a part of that for a generation of teens, you know. So there are a lot of people out there that were very important. We play an important part in their lives. And it's very useful when you want to get a table in a restaurant, you know. No, but that's a great thing. The worst thing, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's sort of like, I feel like not really, you're suspended in adolescence, which, you know, which is fun, but it's also bad, because I think I got to the age of 30, and just the sight of a bill coming through my post, you know, freaked me out. I just didn't know what to do with a telephone bill. You know, you just don't, you know, you just don't know. I guess a lot of athletes have that too, because you're just treated like babies. Because all, you know, it's just about, no, you just concentrate on playing, writing songs, and performing. That's all, and looking good for the video. That's all you've got to do. You know, we'll take care of everything else. But, you know, there's certain things that as adults we need to be able to take care of. You know, you need to be, you know, and when, you know, the boat slows down, the train slows down, and then you're sort of in a position, you know, where you go, you know what, maybe I need to start taking care of that and doing that. But it's kind of overwhelming. Yeah. So maybe that's the worst.
Cool. I think it's a good point for us to maybe hear a little bit more from the book.
Okay. This is a shorter one, honest. Chapter 31, Legal Age. This is Duran Duran on their first trip to Los Angeles. Photographed in Boys Town, in fact, although nobody told us we were in Boys Town at the time. Chapter 31, Legal Age. One thing I discovered on tour in 1981 was that girls, in all languages, liked taking drugs with me. Even though I had a girlfriend back home, my horror of lonely hotel rooms meant I would go to any lengths to avoid sleeping in them alone. Coke, I was beginning to realize, was an effective insurance policy against that eventuality. I'd been a nerd at school. I wasn't a jock or an intellectual and had never had a regular girlfriend as a teenager. Now I only had to wink in a girl's direction in a hotel lobby, backstage, or at a record company party, and I have company until the morning. So, what's the problem, you might ask? Well, the trouble is, and I didn't figure this out until I was almost 40, that there's something about an intimate encounter of that nature with someone you barely know that jars against the spirit. You want it, but it doesn't feel quite right. And when you start doing it night after night, week in, week out, your ideas about love and sex begin to get somewhat distorted. And jumping into bed like porn star Johnny is not as easy as you might imagine, especially with someone whose first name you're not even sure of. You feel awkward, or at least I did. Maybe it was some residue of Catholic guilt, plain old common decency. Hadn't Mother taught me something about this? The drugs and the alcohol served to take away all those doubts, plus any inhibitions or insecurities I or she might have. I didn't want to be lonely, and the drugs ensured I never was. I'm a pin-up on thousands of bedroom walls, but the fear of loneliness is turning me into a cokehead. Of absolute necessity for any touring musician is the itinerary. It usually comes as a gift from the tour manager on the last day of rehearsal. Depending on the length of the tour about to be undertaken, it could cover any length of time between 1 week and 2 months. Page 1 lists the principals, the inner circle, the crew who are going to get the show around the world. All the numbers to call if in trouble are listed there. The management, the agencies, the travel agents, the local promoters. Then follows a page-by-page account of the destinations. October 3rd, Chicago. Band Hotel, Ambassador East, Crew Hotel, Crown Hyatt, Venue, Park West, and so on and so on. I'd not noticed right away that in the left-hand corner of each page of the US itinerary, there was a number, usually 18, 20, or 21. It was months before I was let in on the secret. The numbers referred to the legal age for sexual intercourse in that particular state. The other necessity for the touring musician is the day sheet, usually slipped under the hotel room door while the occupant is still asleep. Regardless of the degree of befuddlement, the day sheet information was always quite clear. Today is October 3rd. It is Friday. You are in Chicago. Today is a show day. Sound check is at 4 p.m. You almost expected it to say, your name is John.
That's awesome. So, you know, I mean, I think at that point in the book, too, you start kind of talking a little bit more, and it comes up even in that chapter, this kind of notion of loneliness. And it's now kind of being equated to drugs and alcohol becoming a larger part of your life. Was that kind of a cause and effect? Was it the loneliness and what you were kind of feeling on the road that led you to that point?
Well, I'm still figuring it out, really. I mean, getting to write a book like this, you know, you really do analyze your behavior and the whys. And, you know, why was I the guy that just didn't, I was the guy in the band that just didn't have the off switch, you know. I mean, it could be 5 o'clock in the morning and everybody else was turning in because we had a travel day or whatever the next day. I'd just be getting started. And, you know, and you become the guy, you know. We've all got one in our family. Every family's got one. Uncle Jake, you know, just doesn't know how to put the plug in the jug. Yeah. Just doesn't know when to stop. And when you are that guy, you know, you start getting a lot of shame. You know, over the years, you become, you know, you're the hungover one. You're the butt of the joke. And you know, I'm not sure what that loneliness was about. I think it was a combination of things. I mean, fame is very, you know, you've got a lot of people around you. giving you attention. It's very addictive, you know. I mean, it's very hard to turn off from. And I found it to be quite an insecure world, actually. You know, we had a couple of good years, but then paranoia kind of set in, and the drugs didn't help that. You know, hangover won't. You know, when you're late for the meeting, you know, what's the first thing you think? What have they been saying about me? You know.
There's some pretty harrowing stories in the book. You know,
Yeah,
all-nighters and some all-nighters and some wild times.
Yeah.
But when did you realize that you had a problem? When did you decide to do something about it?
Well, I think any of us, you know, when do you realize you're an addict? When do you realize you're addicted to shopping or cigarettes? When you try to stop, you know? And often we put that off. We say, yeah, I could stop if I wanted to. You know, I just choose not to. And then, you know, and then you know, so that my late 20s, you know, I tried to stop spending. You know, I tried to stop shagging. You know, I tried to stop getting high. All of these things, and I've got no program. I've got no idea how to do it, and it's really hard. You know, I found that, you know, I guess I was living in LA. I'd moved to LA. I'd had a child. I'm 30, I think now. You know, in my early 30s, and yeah, I was by that point. You know, I'd gotten kind of unhappy. You know, and I felt that I'd blown it. You know, we had a difficult. I mean, the early 80s were great for the band. The second half of the 80s, we were hanging on. You know, hanging on. Like the fucking zeitgeist was over there. You know, and it was like, well, you know, maybe you guys should just call it a day. You know, we were like, we were just getting started. MTV didn't want to play us. Nobody wanted to play us on the radio. You know, and that's when you really have to dig in. You know, and oh God, I mean, that's when people start saying to you, well, you don't really need to work anymore, do you? It's like, what are you supposed to do? You know, I never get that argument because I love my job. So I'm not looking to take an early retirement. But we hung in there. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about, I talk about getting sober in the book because that was profound for me. And I was really lucky. You know, I just happened to meet the right person at the right time who directed me to rehab. And I thought, rehab? I'm not one of those guys, am I? You know, but, you know, it really worked for me. And, you know, and I wanted that to be in the book. I wanted to find a way to write about that was kind of, you know, because it enabled me to have a life, you know, on top of all of that, the fun and games of the 80s.
Hard to look back at that? Hard to tell that story?
Which bit?
Just the kind of darker times and that aspect of it, you know, as you kind of going back and looking over your life and seeing all of these different things that have happened and occurred. Yeah,
well, I mean, you have to, I mean, I knew that, like, there was going to be a recovery element to the book. I knew that was going to be part of, that if I was going to do a book, you know, I was going to have to find a way of describing the experience that I had with rehab and how it had the makeover that I got as a result of it. But then what that meant was I was going to have to show the reader why I needed to go to rehab. So I was going to have to, you know, there was going to have to be, you know, a handful of scenes. I was going to have to take the reader down and get a sense of, you know, what it was like. But, you know, I feel like I found a way of doing it. I mean, the spiritual journey is like one of the undercurrents in the book because it starts out like the first reading that I did. You know, my mother was very religious, but I never bought into that. I think at the peak of my real waste out time was the mid-'80s, and I had an apartment on the Upper West Side of New York, and I used to get so high in that place, and you know, a lot of all-nighters, and there's a scene that I always remembered, which was, you know, there was a storm, and I was, you know, really messed up, Quentin Tarantino style, and what did I do at 9 o'clock? I want to call my parish priest, because I've decided that I need to write a chorale for St. Jude's. You know, it wasn't calling hookers. I'm calling my fucking parish priest who I haven't spoken to in 3 years. You know, and I thought that was really kind of interesting that I did that. And if I could write that scene, I thought that would be different. It might give a key to who I was, rather than I never called in hookers. Actually, I'm happy to say that never appealed to me. But I was looking for some kind of spiritual salvation. You know, even after, you know, 3 or 4 years of using.
It's kind of interesting to hear that connectedness to home. We did a Google Hangout before, and for as much as the kind of varied questions, is a lot of people came back to one of the themes that really comes out in the book, which is really your connectedness to your parents and that type of inspiration, and how your parents, both of them, have passed away, but what that meant to you in your life. So it's really interesting to hear that at a time where everything is kind of going crazy in your life in New York, you're still thinking about back home. And I think that was one of those things, again, that I just feel connected with a lot of different people. 30 years now plus, I think, into Duran Duran. Yeah. What's it like for you today?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm glad I got to write the book over the last year, because we've had a really good time. I mean, we did, our last album, we did it as a digital download on iTunes. It felt like we finally got right with sort of new media, for a couple of years. We just couldn't relate. We couldn't find our place in the industry. This last album, we were lucky. Mark Ronson stepped in, produced, and he gave us a sense. Just having him in the room, you feel hipper. I mean, that was a good thing. And then, and then we started getting into social media networking, promoting the album, and finding that, what that did for the connectivity of our fans was just amazing, and I felt it. I mean, the album came out I think just before Christmas of 2011. Yeah, no, 2010, right, at the end of, not last year, the year before. And we started getting into social networking. And the first show that we did was in London about 3 months later. And the feeling in the room was so charged up. It was completely different to anything that we'd done in the previous 5 years. And I put that down to social networking. Yeah. And people were showing up and they were going, hey, how you doing? And they'd connected because like when the band goes on social networking, people start signing on, following us on Twitter, getting onto Facebook, and they start connecting. And suddenly it's like, Duran fans reunited. It's like one of those the friend networks. And it's generated a lot of energy around the band. And, I don't even worry about like getting in the charts anymore. It's not about that. It's just like we've got this really strong family that's kind of recommitted itself to each other. And actually it's kind of growing again. So, it's been an interesting couple of years. And we're going to go back and do another album with Mark in the spring. And, we're really enjoying our music.
Terrific. Yeah. Any questions?
What are your current musical inspirations?
Yeah, I was playing Led Zeppelin yesterday. But, they're never gonna, they're never not gonna be relevant. I've been listening to a lot of folk rock lately, actually. Burt Yanks, John Renbourn, sort of old English guitar music. But I like modern music. I like to hear, great modern music. Errol Alkin is a DJ that I really like, and he's put out an album. It's like a curated DJ set. That's kind of like my album of choice at the moment. It's just, you just have to look. I mean, like last year, I was on the road in England, and I was listening to Louis Armstrong. I thought, this is what it's come to. I'm listening to music from the 30s. That's how crap contemporary music is, And I just chanced upon this record store called Piccadilly Records in Manchester. I went in. It was December, and they'd curated the year's music, the year's best music, and they printed up a pamphlet. Amoeba do it, Rough Trade do it in London, and they printed up a pamphlet, and all the staff from the record store got to write a little blurb about what they thought was the important, best music of the year. And I'm opening up this pamphlet, and almost every one of them is saying, wow, the best music of 2011. I don't know where to begin. It was such a fantastic year for music. And I'm thinking, fantastic year for music. What, and then you realize how out of touch I was, and I bought half a dozen albums their top 6 albums of the year. Every one of them, Kurt Weill, Washed Out, Metronomy, like half a dozen bands that I'd not heard of became my new favorite band. So I just have to get out there. If I want to be into contemporary music, I just have to make an effort. Thanks.
So I sort of have a follow-up question to that. For music discovery, for your own music that you listen to, Do you find yourself using digital services? Like you said, going to record stores, and if you are using digital services, are you using Spotify or YouTube or iTunes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the hunt all the time for music that I have not heard before. It doesn't have to be new, it can be old, but something that's going to inspire me, that's going to keep me interested. I find that, as a bass player, I can only listen to contemporary music for so long because, most of the great bass work is older. But I've always got a stack of stuff that I'm working my way through. I mean, I do use iTunes if there's something that I need now. But if it's something that's important to me, I'm still attached to physical products. I've sort of gotten back into vintage vinyl, the way some people get into vintage wines. I mean, like the idea of taking Exile on Main Street out, maybe once every 2 years, and putting it on. That for me, that's like uncorking a vintage bottle of wine. I just want to do it, and then I don't want to hear it for another 2 years. There's not, because music, like any art, it doesn't have infinite amounts of energy into it. In it, you have to pace yourself in your appreciation of it, I find. I also found, we were talking over lunch, how the music, like those three bands that I just mentioned, I still am attached to imagery. Like when I still like packaging that tells me something about, that gives me something visual that I can connect with the music that I'm listening to. And I find that if it's music that I'm going around telling everybody, you've got to get this band, you've got to buy this, then I own that physical product. I've got to have it. I've got to have something that I can relate to on that level. I haven't been able to let go of that yet. Thanks.
Thanks.
Can you fill us in on how you guys came up with the name Duran Duran?
Yeah, it's from the film Barbarella, with Jane Fonda as the sexy lady astronaut. It was taken from a French cartoon strip, and the film is Roger Vadim. It's a really extraordinary film. It's beautifully shot, kind of kitsch, and she has to go find, I think the opening line in the film is, Barbarella, you must find Duran Duran from the planet Earth. That's the opening line in the film. And Duran Duran is this criminal, this sort of trans-universal criminal who has stolen some machine that is guaranteed to give women pleasure. But that had nothing to do with our choice of name. I mean, it was just a time where everybody was naming their band The something, The Damned, The Boys, The Clash. So I kind of like the idea that this had something sort of, it seemed modern.
Do you have a favorite Duran Duran album or single or video?
Well, I think Rio is probably the album that most, it's just where we really caught the wave, and I think every note of it works, better than works. Every note of it is great. But I'm proud of a lot. I'm proud of Ordinary World as a song, very much. Notorious. View to a Kill. That's interesting. Writing a Bond theme is like designing a Rolls Royce. It's really, really difficult, because you've got so many boxes you have to tick for it to work for the Bond franchise. But I think we did a really good job of that. And that was a difficult song to write. There was a lot of infighting going on while we were doing it, but I'm really happy with that one.
That was a cool video, too.
Oh, you think so? See, I hate that video.
Wow.
No, it's not one of my favorites, but I'd rather watch the titles from the film unfurl, Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Terrific.
Have you tried playing your song on Rock Band?
No. Never.
And do you get because they change the level, right? Some songs are harder than others. Do you appreciate it if your song is the easy song or the hard song, or you don't?
No. You could be talking to me about brain surgery. I know nothing about Rock Band.
I'm wondering if you can kind of paint a picture for us of what it was like, the first public performance that you did as the
Fab Five lineup with Simon. What was that night like? Was it a disaster, or was it where magic, everything came together?
No, we've got to go back to the club that we were based out of, which was a club called the Rum Runner in Birmingham, and it was a very, very culty kind of scene. It was a very fashion-oriented scene. You know, it was kind of post-punk, and it was this kind of glamour that was coming back. It was very ambiguous sexually. You know, there was a lot of gays on the scene. People were just into dressing up. Everybody did something with their hair, you know, dyed, quiffed, whatever, you know. And the music, it was like a kind of an oasis, really, a post-punk oasis. And the kind of music that was popular there was this sort of new electronic vibe, like Simple Minds, Japan, bands like that. And so we became the house band there. And we were rehearsing there, and we all had jobs there, you know. We'd all work behind the bar or work on the door, or, you know, and in return for that, the owners had given us this. And we had a rehearsal space up to just off the main bar. And on a Friday night, which was a really hot night in the club, we'd like go up and turn on our gear, and we'd invite some of our friends up at midnight, and we'd just play some songs while everybody is dancing down on the floor. And so we were, you know, so when we had our first date, well, the final debut, as I call it, which was like like version 5 of the band, we were playing to friends, and everybody kind of knew us, and there was a sense of like, okay, these are our guys, this is our band, and you know, nobody's gonna, you know, it's not like a foot stomping kind of, it was not like a yeah kind of scene. It was like, okay, yeah, cool, yeah, you guys, you know. Yeah, I mean, there are 1 or 2 pictures from that particular show in the book. In fact, I'll point them out to you afterwards. Thanks.
Any other questions?
What was going on in the band when Arcadia,
Yeah.
kind of the branch out there,
Yeah,
were you guys broken up, or?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I feel in a way we kind of had. I mean, I mean, it's funny, you know. It's like the pressure was so great in the mid '80s, you know, just to write big hits. And we we weren't all agreeing on the direction the band should be taken, so should take. So when we finished the third album, Andy and I decided we wanted to do something like a side project. And so, you know, over time we connected with Robert Palmer, Tony Thompson, Bernard Edwards, the rhythm section from Chic, and we made that album. And then, you know, and then Simon, Nick, and Roger kind of countered that with Arcadia, and it was, yeah, I mean, it was difficult. You know, it was like 9 months maybe, where we were very much, there were 2 camps, and that's in the book, because you know, we were kind of like fighting with the managers, and you know, it wasn't a happy time really. It was quite difficult, but it's in there. Any more for any more? Okay.
I think that's a good question to segue actually into the last reading.
Okay. We got to play Coachella last year, and it was a big one for me because I've got kids. I've got teenage kids that have been telling me for years, "You guys got to play Coachella." You know, it was like final validation with the teenagers, but it was magical. It was magical. So I chose to end the book on that night. Behind the stage, to the side of the ramp, our band has gathered. We've stepped off the pair of golf carts that have brought us the half-mile from our dressing room in battery-powered silence. The air is warm and electric blue. We acknowledge each other without words, using nods and smiles, backslaps, and other gestures of encouragement. Instincts surge. Every other concern falls away. Since 1981, we've released our songs on vinyl, cassette tape, CD, 8-track, digital audio tape, mini-disc, ringtones, MP3, streaming and download for purchase or rental. I've long since learned to relax and cease worrying about how the music finds its way to your ears. Just play, just write. By the time we begin the All You Need Is Now tour, which tonight's performance at Coachella is a part of, excitement levels have reached fever pitch. We've come a long way to get to this holy place, Coachella, and a lot has changed in the last 30 years. Cell phones, computers, SUVs, nose hair trimmers, supplements, Propecia, paperless itineraries, in-room humidifiers, steam rooms, saunas, and gyms, pre-show massage, Twitter, Spotify, and Google. Touring with 3,000 songs in my pocket and 30 books on an iPad, therapy by Skype, great coffee everywhere. Another difference is out there where there are just as many men as women in the audience tonight. At day's end, my job is to be a catalyst for connectivity, to help bring people closer together, men and women, girls and boys. That's what the music has done for me. What hasn't changed are the notes that run up and down the neck of the bass, and the feeling that hits you when one note rubs against another in a way that sets the hair up on the back of your neck, and the sound of the crowd, and the feeling of adrenaline that charges through my body when I hear it, holding that 4-string machine gun on stage, less than 6 feet away from you. Simon is running through his vocal warm-ups, which we so often rib him about. Nick has a plastic cup in his left hand and is taking sips from it, now reaching his right hand upward to flash a snapshot on his camera. We all fiddle with our in-ear monitors, trying the volume, listening for interference. A photographer from Spin magazine wants to take a picture. We assemble reluctantly, everyone just wanting to get on with the show. It's an outdoor festival, so tour manager Craig will not get to give his usual cue to take the house lights down. Tonight, that is one of God's jobs, and what a job of it he is doing. A glittering bauble of sunlight fights to stay above the horizon. A full moon appears, a late-coming VIP that takes a seat above the lighting gantry at 11 o'clock high. Nature presents for us a better light show than any human could ever have created. We walk together up the ramp. The stage is set, the electronics are primed, the audience ready. Nick walks on first in a black net snood borrowed from Lady Gaga. He walks across the stage and onto his riser, puts down his camera, and touches the Andromeda synthesizer, from which issues forth a sample of the exact sound he used to begin our first single, Planet Earth, written and recorded over 30 years ago. My heart is pounding. There is no better time than this, when I'm about to take the stage and the future belongs to me. This is what the moment feels like as I walk out onto the stage one more time. Roger's drums kick in, an 8-bar count, and I'm in with him, the galloping groove that started it all for me. 30,000 California kids, eyes and teeth smiling, cameras and cell phones popping, a million tiny seductions all at once, and the music never sounded better. Thank you.
John, on behalf of Google, thank you very much for joining us. That was really terrific. So John's going to be signing books right outside. Thanks, everybody.